Hi, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today in our 2021 um, Coffee Talk. We've been doing this last year and we're starting now. This Today we're going to talk about Biden's administration and some of the new initiatives and how it affects DHS, but we really want to welcome you and thank you for joining us. Next time on Coffee Talk, we're going to be talking about Canadian and US relationships in immigration and the bans. And after that, we're going to discuss surrogacy and immigration naturalization. Our second trimester, our second quarter, will bring up some other topics dealing with the Biden administration and any updates. So today we have some great speakers. As always, there's Marcela Bermudez and Nair, and you guys can see their bios, but it's my privilege to have them as partners at Greenspoon Marder. They're both amazing immigration partners, people who really care about their clients, and people who are up to date in what's happening at immigration. We're also really pleased to have with us today Bill Riley. Bill Riley, I'm also fortunate to be a friend of his, and we go way back from our days in government. But he was a stellar star in government and is in the private sector as well. He had 3 tours with government, and although he did a lot of good work as a special agent and then moving up the ranks in ICE and throughout on drug trafficking and counterfeit, he now manages Guidepost, which does a lot in enforcement and in import, export, and in immigration. So we're really lucky to have him today, and we think you're going to really enjoy the government state of mind and what's going on more close to home in DC. We're going to talk a little bit, Marcela's going to introduce you a little bit to travel bans. Deanie is going to talk on some of the impact of H-1B workers. And Bill's going to really bring up a lot about what is DHS, what is ICE, what's USCIS, what are all these little agencies that we're constantly talking about. And it's always on the news. How are they divided? What do they do? How do they function? How do they work together? How are they coordinate? And what Biden's going to do with all that. So if Marcela can start us off with
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Good to see you all, or hear you all, or you to see us all late. Just as an update, we're back to COVID travel bans. I know it's been a constant discussion, but it's something that we have been monitoring because it's been affecting so many people in so many ways. There is some good news, at least for this time around. Let's just start with get some of the updates through, because I don't want to take a lot of time from the other panels because there's good things to discuss. Canada. So our bans with Canada and Mexico for the border crossing was extended again as expected. Right now it's effective until March 21st. Expect that it's probably going to be extended again. Remember, these are the ones that are being extended on monthly increments. So we'll see. And that's likely to be extended. And remember also that it's also a land crossing ban. So flights are not affected. If you're flying in, it doesn't affect you, but it affects if you're a land crossing, okay? On the Schengen, all of those are still in place. If you recall, Trump was, on the Trump administration, they were going to cancel them, and then Biden reinstated them. So we're still with our Schengen, UK, Ireland, China, Brazil, and Iran, but you can't get the national interest exemptions. National interest exemptions, that has been a nightmare. They're completely inconsistent still. Consulates sometimes go completely silent off the radar. The workaround now is going through CBP when you can't get through to the consulate or get your positive response on national interest exceptions. There's something that you have to comply with, some requirements of showing proof that you've tried to go to the consulate, but after you can prove that you've gone to the consulate, made attempts, or at least waited 2 weeks, you can then go and approach Customs and Border Patrol, which is at the airports. So you're approaching the airports to see if the person can board. You show them the attempts, the failed attempts, non-responsiveness from the consulates, and they are sometimes helpful. The consulate, the post that was really helpful last summer, JFK, was amazing. Atlanta is now picking up as well. So you may have to modify your travel, come in through different ports, but and national interest exemptions, it's definitely a wild card. It could affect your travel. You may not make it back on time, the date you need to, so you have to have pack your bag and pack your patience if you are going out, because it's unpredictable. Okay, what else? Muslim ban, we talked about that last time, gone. The other ban that was revoked, fortunately, we have a win here. The immigrant visa bans. Immigrant visa bans have been revoked, effective, or it was in proclamation February 24th. And the little wrinkle here is the devil in the details is how are we going to get the consulates to start acting on that proclamation? Getting the appointments when all the concerts are closed. They're all an emergency, but it's still hopeful. They are working through their backlogs. And if you were issued a visa under an immigrant visa and you couldn't travel because of the ban, there's nothing prohibiting you from entering now. So that's good news. Now, what happens in national immigrant visa ban? The one that bars the L's, H's, J's, H-2Bs, most J's. That is still in place, has not been revoked. So the big question is what's happening? Why wasn't that revoked as part of the immigrant visa ban? What is Biden waiting for? Will he revoke it or let it sunset March 31st? We're almost there. So by next coffee talk, we'll know the answer. But you have to keep in mind, Biden is also very much into protecting US workforce. So it's not, I don't know if we're all taking bets here on this yet, but either it's going to sunset on its own. Remember, there's also some litigation on that proclamation.
I have a question. What kind of hope can we send to those F1 students who have been waiting and waiting and waiting abroad for a visa to enter the US, or no hope?
All right, let's see March 31st.
I only say F1s because, as Deanie and Bill know, there's a lot of F1s that move in their students and they go to H. They're not the only ones, I understand, but I'm just saying as a shout out.
I mean, there's all keep in mind. There is the injunction with there's a lawsuit against proclamation, right? So if their company is affiliated to the right organizations, it's easier said than done, right? But that's an option. There's also a list of the exemptions. There's still exemptions built into this ban. Not hopeful, not fantastic, but we're almost there. March 31st. Let's wait and see. And they also asked, actually, yesterday, Alejandro Mayorkas, DHS secretary, was asked what was happening. And he also said he didn't know. He had no indication of which way this was going. It's really an unknown. And I don't know. I'm not a betting person, so I'm not taking bets on what
I'm betting it gets extended. I'm betting it gets extended, honestly. The Mayorkas's session yesterday was very vague. I was not thrilled with his answers. And so for me, that made me even more nervous that it's still going to be extended. Maybe it's a 60 days, 90. I think there's politics being hit here. And
it's still not a priority for Biden. He has certain priorities, and most of them are on your asylum cases, on your children. 100 children were reunited so far. They did say the children cannot be reunited in the U.S. So, look, if I have to choose one, work with the children first. But it's hard. It's hard. There's a lot to tackle. So with that, 5 minutes.
Well, listen, for those students, just for clarification, the H-1B starts October 1st. So you can imagine that many people out there are wondering, when can I bring my workers in? You know, we hired them, if they still even have a job offer anymore. It's a long wait to be waiting. So we don't know. Here we are, February. We don't know if they're working for a multinational and they get to be working abroad. And any shout out, Marcela, to people who are stranded abroad, waiting for their visas that were canceled.
Patience. Definitely, if you have an urgent date, you have to be here. And if you are in a Schengen country, 14 days elsewhere. That's going to be your best bet, because if you're waiting for the consulate to get back to them, you've tried and they're not responding. Look, I had a case who I requested a national interest exemption from Madrid, and they were really responsive. And then they kind of shut on and off like a valve. And by the time I had gone through CBP to get the person authorization to board, a month later, the consulate wrote to me and said, okay, we're ready to issue your NIE for your client. He's not even in Spain anymore. He's gone. So workarounds and flexibility.
Right. Dean, what do you think is going to be happening with the H-1Bs as we look from the other side here, sitting in the United States?
Well, I think that, the good thing was that they delayed the wage lottery for this cap season. That was a big sigh of relief for a lot of my clients and a lot of companies that I know. But I always caution all my clients that Biden is on that same wavelength. He does believe that the H-1B should be issued based on salaries and the highest wages that are going to be paid to these foreign nationals. So there isn't that much daylight between Trump and Biden on that specific area. So I think they have to be somewhat careful of what Biden is going to do. Maybe, again, as we talked about, that's not priority one. So maybe that's the reason it's delayed and they have to work out all the kinks. But 22, we probably might see that. And so I think if you are wanting to file, this is the year you want to file, because next year we might be looking at that. I'm happy to see some things, huh? I'm sure.
Just to bring it home, I was looking at a wage, and if the wages were to increase, I was looking at a communications position in New York, and the wage, just to get out how important this wage difference is, it was $70,000 more.
Right, absolutely.
Wage. So if you're going to hire an H-1B worker, you're almost like, wow. I mean, they can be more expensive than our whole staff.
Right, absolutely. And again, the fees, right? The fees, and if you want to do premium processing, right, it's $2,500. Yeah, that's ridiculous. So again, it's cost prohibitive to hire a foreign national at this point. So,
let's mute her. No.
But I mean, for companies, that's the thought process they're all having right now. They're just like, is this the business we need to be in, or do we just not, do this anymore? And I think that even though we're seeing some good decisions, when I'm filing cases, I'm definitely seeing pretty straightforward approvals, very little less on the RFPs that we used to see. But I think that's just the calm before the storm, personally. I think it's still coming. I'm happy to see premium processing for E3s. Like, come on, people, why wasn't that issued like years ago? I'm hoping to see some other type of reforms come into play, especially in employment-based green cards. Like, that is something that I really think needs to be looked at carefully and reformed. The wait time for an Indian national is like over 50 years. That is nonsense. They're not going to get their green card in their lifetime. So that really needs to change. And those are some of the things I'm hoping to see in the Biden administration as a priority.
Yeah, that would be good. The backlogs are incredible. I mean, people, you're working for an employer, you have portability provisions. I mean, you have provisions where people go work at another company, but before you get that actual green card, it's for some countries, it's just years. It's 20 years and you still can't vote, and I mean, you're retired from the company and then you still haven't gotten your green card, so you can't stay here.
If it's 50 years on the good side, I mean, what's the point? And some of these people, the point is like, I got to get my kids through. And that's really the motivation. They know the backlog is that long, but they think to themselves, this gives me an opportunity for my children. Maybe they're all US citizens, or maybe they can, if they're, H4s, get a US education. That's really the motivation when I speak to Indian nationals, Chinese nationals. Why are you here? You're waiting it out this long. So, but that's where I hope the Biden administration really takes some priorities and looks at it very carefully.
Well, it's a good thing. We have let's just put it this way. We have a long relationship with our clients. As we talk about, thank you. And also as we talk about, the department, where is the visa issued? What do you mean Department of State? What is ICE? What is CBP? What is DHS? What is USCIS? You read it in, every newspaper, every blog. We're a world of acronyms in the government that no one truly understands. But some people understand it better than others and can explain it very well. So if you don't mind, Mr. Riley.
All right, thank you, Patsy. I definitely don't purport to be an expert on all of, as we call it, the alphabet soup, but I definitely know the one that used to pay me for many years. But just in general terms and looking at the topics that we're talking about, immigration and visas, I'll start with the big one is Department of Homeland Security. And the two largest entities that relate to this topic within DHS are Immigration and Customs Enforcement, otherwise known as ICE, my former agency, the coolest acronym in the federal government. Pause for laughs.
I got it.
Yep. And CBP, Customs and Border Protection. So the easiest way to understand the two of those, because they are both law enforcement agencies, is CBP is uniform. Think of your uniformed police that you would see in any major metropolitan area. And ICE is more of the detective side, mostly plain clothes. So I'll start with CBP, going in order of entry into the country. CBP at the ports of entry will be wearing blue uniforms. That division of CBP is Office of Field Operations, usually known as inspections or inspectors. They also have cargo duties, agriculture duties, the beagles at the airports, things like that. But they are the presence at the ports. And think larger than just like an airport. Think land ports, think seaports, because they are all over the place and they have officers there. So that's OFO. And that's who your students, your H's, that's the face that they're going to be seeing when they present themselves for entry into the US. The blue uniform, CBP, OFO. They also have another large side, the Border Patrol. Border Patrol, even when they were with INS back in the day, always liked to differentiate themselves from the counterparts in their agency. They would, even in INS, they'd say, well, Border Patrol's doing this, what about INS? And we would have to remind them, you're part of INS. But they're the green uniforms. They handle everything in between the ports. So that would be, it's easier to picture southern border because it's the largest, and that's where most of them are, but also the Canadian border. They are in southern Florida. They are in the Gulf of Mexico, and they have the boats and the planes. So air and marine operations is heavily in that as well. When you see the drones and things like that on the border for surveillance, that's all within CBP. Heavily controlled by the Border Patrol. Switching over to my old agency, ICE, which was basically created from the enforcement, investigations, and detention removal from INS, as well as the investigations from Customs. So they're heavily the investigators. So ICE has two primary divisions, Homeland Security Investigations, HSI. Don't try typing it because it will come out as his every single time. That's where I work. Those are the special agents. They heavily investigate criminal violations, not just immigration, but customs. Also child pornography. Why people say that? Well, because it comes across the border at some point electronically. Plus it was a legacy customs. Prior to the internet, all that type of contraband came in through mail, through cargo, things like that. So the legacy stayed. So I won't touch the political point, but when I do hear abolish ICE, I think a lot of people don't understand that the investigation side of ICE investigates over 400 violations of law. HSI seizes more drugs than the DEA, prosecutes more drug dealers. Not to say that they don't do higher ones, they do, but HSI prosecutes more child sexual abusers and human traffickers than any other agency out there. So anybody who has that concept, there's a lot more than just the arresting unauthorized individuals in the country. The other big side of ICE is enforcement and removal operations. They handle more of the administrative. When we say administrative type of activity, an arrest, purpose of an administrative arrest is to seek removal, as opposed to criminal investigations at HSI, where it's to prosecute and put someone in jail. ERO are the ones that take a lot more of the heat for the arrest. I'm sorry, get back.
Yeah, I was just going to say that it's scary when you say the administrative side, because when you say the word removal, for most people, they're like, administrative side, oh, that sounds nice.
Yeah.
And so they administratively remove you from the US.
Exactly. And actually, it is scary because the threshold for charging those violations is much lower than in a criminal case. Beyond a reasonable doubt versus reasonable suspicion. You charge someone criminally, they have a constitutional right to a lawyer. You charge someone administratively for removal, they can get an attorney, but they have to find her and pay for their own attorney. So it may sound nicer, but in a lot of ways it is. It's actually more serious in a lot of ways because they have individuals charged that way have a lot less rights. Enforcement and removal operations also manages all of the immigrant detainees. If someone's prosecuted criminally on the federal side, they go to the Bureau of Prisons and the Marshals. If they're charged administratively, they go to enforcement and removal operations. Again, very different types of facilities and different rights in those facilities. That's the overview of DHS, but you also have two other large components in this topic. One is Department of Labor, obviously work-related visa petitions or green card petitions. DOL will take a look and has authority over that. And then probably the other biggest component in anything immigration related is Department of State. Outside the country, their consular division are the ones who issue visas. And people think everybody talks very well. They really don't. I would say since 9/11, the communication has gotten better and the advent of technology. But just because someone's issued a visa, and this is a common mistake, does not guarantee you will get admitted into the country. When we went through basic immigration training, the first rule we were taught is it's not so until I say it's so at the port of entry. So you could have a visa that was issued to you. You could have been waiting 10 years for it.
Mm-hmm.
You're questioned at the port of entry. The inspector doesn't like what she or he hears, or they find evidence that you may have previously violated a visa. You may not get into the country. So that visa is not a guarantee. So that's kind of the overview of the major agencies. And what I did want to kind of segue into with that is, because we are talking about work visas and things like that, that with any of these privileges, because that's what they will be called, is a privilege to enter the country on a visa, come with it some compliance matters. And that's what our company does. We consult with individuals and heavily on businesses and corporations on how to manage the risk and how to address that risk and establish compliance programs. And when people think compliance, they're like, well, I'm not SEC regulated. I'm not regulated by banking requirements. But if you are a company that has a decent sized proportion of, let's say, individuals on H visas, you have a compliance program that you need to address. And they are heavily regulated. It takes a while and multiple levels of approval. And as such, you should be looking at as a compliance program. And a few things on that is ensuring that the people managing that program know what they're doing, because if they don't, they have consequences not only for the company, but also the worker. If there's fraud suspected, I can guarantee you the company name will go in a lookout, and every worker coming in has the potential of being stopped, put in secondary, and turned around if that's the case. So it's a little bit of a scare, but the concept needs to be, and this ties in with no matter what the Biden administration does. The two biggest things that in my 29 years of experience in immigration enforcement that influence immigration policy are politics and the economy. And that's what we're talking about. Work, students, it all ties in. And there's ebb and flow. I've seen 3 or 4 ebb and flows. I started with the first Bush administration, worked through Clinton, worked through second Bush and Obama. I was not in the last administration.
And what are you expecting now with Biden?
So definitely there's going to be some reduction in enforcement. We've seen some memos coming out from our colleagues where, a number of us from ICE were either lawyers or agents that worked in government agencies. Some of the initial things that you mentioned were obviously the asylees. That's being addressed top tier. We saw some interior enforcement memos going out, primarily on the enforcement removal side, not the investigation side, reprioritizing who they should arrest and at what level they need approval, which is a very high level to get beyond. The 3 priorities that were laid out, and those are pretty simple: national security threats, so terrorists; 2, recent border entries with the date of November 1st, 2020. So they're actually a second tier priority. I would have thought it would have been third. And the third tier are aggravated felons. So you could say, what's not in that? Basic visa overstays, or tourist overstays, things like that. Non-criminal, undocumented individuals. That's not to say they're home free, but it's not a priority. And they will need a much higher level of approval to effect any arrest on those individuals, as opposed to the last administration where it didn't matter. Anybody that was in violation could be arrested at any time.
It seems to be the same priorities as the Obama administration.
Exactly.
Right?
Like I say, as much things has changed, they really don't. I mean, a lot of times early on administrations, they'll be dusting off an old playbook. we saw that with the Trump administration coming in. Some things that were on the books or, policies that were written post 9/11, definitely much more on the aggressive side. We saw them getting dusted off by people in the administration. I'm like, wow, I remember seeing that language somewhere else. And here it was. It was a memo from right after 9/11. So, yeah, I think that it's going to be some similar things with the Obama administration. And again, economies, both difficult times, right after the 2008 crisis now. So even though there will be a reduction in some areas, other areas, I think it'll be a little slower to get to. As you mentioned, the H's. I think we'll get to that point. The visas will come more freely. But I do think you will see still enforcement. It's not going to be without a doubt. So other areas we see definitely some I-9 desk audits, not the big worksite raids, as well as potentially more on-site visa reviews, whether that be CVIS at schools, large users of HLs and Bs. I think you're going to see some activity there.
Yeah, the interesting part is now that we're going into a year of this work from home and enforcement and site visits, where are they going to find people?
No, they're finding finding
home.
email.
We just have a few minutes left, and I don't want to interrupt the flow of this, but so if anyone has any questions, you guys are more than welcome out in the audience to submit any questions you have. If not, Bill, what do you think for visa fraud with all the national interest waivers, with all the emergencies, I need to get home because, my dog ate my homework, to really important reasons. And also, what do you think of compliance? Are they going to be, it's COVID, are they walking into buildings? Are they going to do it? Are they going to do audits? What are your thoughts in like 2 minutes?
Yeah, I think you'll definitely see more of a desk, we call it the desk base, where it's going to be, notices going out via mail, requiring the employer to gather the documentation, upload it or send it in. At least for the next 6 months until we start getting to that high threshold of vaccines. Don't forget too, most of your ICE officers have already been vaccinated. They were tier 1. I've seen them all putting it up on Facebook. Again, they're considered first responders because they do have to respond to some of the, big activities. So they're going to be mobile, but I still think early on in this administration, it's not going to be a lot of boots on the ground going out to places. I think it'll be slowly transitioning into that, but there will be a lot more desk audits, which to me can be sometimes worse. In an I-9 perspective, yes, a raid on a worksite is horrible. There's a lot of emotions, a lot of physical issues, a lot of trauma for individuals, but an auditor sitting in a desk can do an audit in 3 months and send out a suspect document notice with 1,000 names on it and cause almost as much agony without ever leaving the confines of their desk. So I just caution people on being too passive about it, because paper-based reviews, can have an adverse effect as well.
Okay, well, that's good to know. We had a few questions. One of them was, someone wants to know how to get an actual consular officer's name. I'm sure that must be very frustrating for people when they're just, emailing randomly and they don't like the decision. I guess they would like to write to them and say, why me?
Yeah, I mean, you're highly unlikely ever going to get that. They don't want their names on there. Half the time you don't even see the deciding official's name on the paperwork. The best way to do it is either finding out who the CG Consular General is, starting with them. Eventually that will cascade down ideally. And, I always use the elected official route. Department of State is a massive entity, most of which is not in this country, but having your local congressional, U.S. congresswoman or congressman, that's who you vote for. That's what they're there for. That's why they have liaison offices. It's not going to be timely, but that's the first route I would go, when I would have an issue. So I think you're better off that, because you're not going to get individuals, line officers' names very easily.
And I think that would be hopefully a good change in the Biden administration, because it was not available in the Trump administration. In Obama's, we used to do that all the time. And then Trump, they were not helpful at all. They wouldn't even entertain it. Hopefully we'll see that change in Biden's.
Yeah.
It's a good point. Note this too. Under the last administration, some of these agencies were decimated in employees. They froze hiring. State Department probably took some of the worst hits on that, probably after EPA. Even my old agency, ICE, which was a huge priority for the last president, not once in the 4 years of the Trump administration did they have a Senate confirmed director. I knew 2 of the acting directors personally, good friends of mine, but not once. So even when you think you know it, like, yeah, this is a position he's going to fill, never filled it.
Mm.
So
Smokes and mirrors.
Yeah,
Right.
these agencies have years worth of personnel they need to fill, like State Department.
Yeah.
I think that we can expect a lot in terms of backlog. By the time they catch up, we could all be retired. I don't know.
In the next administration.
I think that hopefully they can get, well, I don't want to speculate on what they're going to do with the budget, but I would assume that they're going to try to hire up as soon as they can, because it's got to be an impossible task if you're in government trying to, meet the demands of the goals that are set forth for the agency and the mission statements. It's going to be impossible without the right task force.
Yeah, agree. And some of these jobs take years. Consular, it's not like you get hired and sent overseas. You're talking a year from the time hiring to get on board, which means you had to apply last year to even get hired. So, it's a 2-year process to put somebody, a brand new person, in a consular seat abroad. So, that the lag time on those is really far behind.
Look, I'm sorry that we have to, I think our time, although short today, was very important. I cannot thank everyone enough for coming today, for joining our seminar. Marcela, Bill, Dini, thank you so much for your comments and your insight. We'll see you guys all next time, and stay tuned for Canada and the US. Thank you again, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Fun.